Good afternoon. Welcome to the Newsroom Pub. I'm Milwaukee Press Club President Corey Hess from the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. This is up high today. I'm happy to be here with Mayor Cavalier Johnson. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our event sponsors. Our presenting sponsor is Spectrum News 1. Supporting sponsor is We Energies. I'd also like to thank our event partner, WisPolitics.com. WisPolitics partners with the Press Club for this luncheon as part of an ongoing series sponsored by UW-Milwaukee, Wisconsin Academy of Global Education and Training, 1125 at Pabst, Milwaukee Police Association, the Firm Consulting, Medical College of Wisconsin, and Spectrum. I'd first like to welcome our media panel. We have Eric Bilstad from 620 WTMJ, Allison Durr from the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, and Aaron Maben from Fox 6. Now back to Mayor Johnson. Voters overwhelmingly supported acting Mayor Cavalier Johnson to become the city's first elected Black mayor in April. He had held that role since former Mayor Tom Barrett departed for Luxembourg in December. He joins us today, now 2 months into the job. Welcome, Mayor Johnson.
Well, I don't know if it's been exactly 2 months yet. Give me a little chance to be a little new. So I'm Cavalier Johnson. I'm mayor of the city of Milwaukee, and I appreciate having the opportunity to join you all here again at this Newsmaker Luncheon. You know, the hardest thing that I had ever done in my life prior to becoming mayor was running for mayor. And it was only eclipsed by being elected mayor and the enormity of the responsibility of the job, the complexity of all the issues, and, you know, the fact that this is a job in which, you know, some of you have heard the term, you know, wearing a lot of hats or switching hats, you know, day in and day out, because no 2 days are the same. In this role, you're doing that constantly. It could be, you know, at the scene of a shooting on the northwest side of the city, where you're helping families who are grieving because they just learned about the loss of a loved one, or it could be, you know, downtown, like this morning, where at a parklet we're celebrating Be Kind Day in Milwaukee, or going to the north side, where I just was at just a little bit ago at Phyllis Wheatley Elementary School, the former Phyllis Wheatley Elementary School that's being converted now into apartments, some with affordable rates for citizens right here in the city. I used to live right across the street from Phyllis Wheatley, and one of the many places I lived as a kid, and my younger siblings went to that school. So it was very interesting to be there now as mayor to see the transformation that's happening. Milwaukee, like cities across the country, is forever changing. And that's what cities are supposed to do. They're supposed to be transformative. You're supposed to experience cities. You're supposed to feel something when you're in a city. And that's exactly what we should be working on in the city of Milwaukee. That's what I want to do. That's why I talked about, you know, working to grow the city's population. That's why I talked about working to make sure there's family support and opportunities for folks. That's why I think it's important for us to continue our partnership, and I use that word with intention, with the state government, so that we can improve services here in Milwaukee and continue to be able to provide those services, and so many more things. So I'm very much looking forward to having a conversation with each and every single one of you today. But first, starting off with our esteemed panel here to my right.
Thank you, sir. I know one of the issues the city's been dealing with is carjackings that have taken place, and there is now video posted on YouTube. I don't want to call it a documentary, but a documentary-esque video that's posted where some of the suspects involved in some of these are glorifying, discussing it, talking about what's happening and why they're doing it, and having fun with it. Have you seen the videos? What is your reaction to it, and how can the city best get to a target of a younger generation which consumes a lot of media via YouTube and other social media platforms?
That's a great question, and yes, I've seen some parts of it, certainly. And my, you know, immediate thought was this, after seeing, you know, bits and pieces and seeing what you're talking about, where young people who are engaged in this sort of activity, stealing cars and driving recklessly throughout the city, where they've got, in their own words, you know, no regard for human life, where they're scaring folks. It made me remember a news story, a viral clip that happened from earlier this year, where a woman who was so distraught by the fact that, you know, these young people were driving crazily in her neighborhood, and she went on a tirade, encouraging parents to take a more active role in the lives of their young people. So my thoughts were these: is that it was, first of all, it was wild, it was sad, and the actions that they were taking with disregard for their own safety and the safety of their fellow citizens was stupid. So those were my initial reactions to it. And what can the city do about it? I think a number of things. But it's not just us. So I'll talk about some of the things that we're doing to approach it, but then continue to lay out the marker that I think is critically important for addressing this and so many other issues. Obviously, we've got public safety apparatus here in the city, primarily with the police department, and police have been a great partner and supporter trying to deal with the issue of reckless driving and so many other issues across Milwaukee. So there's that. There's a traffic safety unit that was established a little more than a year ago, perhaps about a year and a half ago or so, that in the first year of operation had made contact, tickets and otherwise, education and otherwise, with over 20,000 folks who were driving recklessly in the city. So that's one avenue. Another avenue that I think is important that I continue to press the Department of Public Works on is using the built environment, built infrastructure to tackle the issue of reckless driving. Look, it's going to be really hard for somebody to drive recklessly and do what has been known now as the Milwaukee slide, where they creep up on the right and then pass you through a red light or a stop sign or whatever. It's really hard to do that when there's some concrete right there, right? And so I've been pressing the Department of Public Works to install curb extensions and bus bulbs and bump outs so that we can mitigate the opportunity for folks to be able to drive recklessly. I have been a full-throated supporter and a believer in universal driver's education for young people. And as a member of the council, I supported those initiatives to try to make sure that young people who are in Milwaukee Public Schools have access to universal driver's education. Because if you don't have a foundation in driving, that doesn't mean that you're not going to drive. And I think about myself, right? As a young person, when I was in high school some years ago, I was fortunate enough to have a job and work and to be able to afford driver ed. Fast forward these years later, I've taught my younger siblings and cousins how to drive, and I did so with a foundation in driving that I was taught the right way. Now, my peers who perhaps could not afford it, that doesn't mean that they did not drive, and if they didn't have foundations, well, guess what? That's not stopping them from teaching, their siblings and cousins to drive too. And so now, you've got two generations basically where, young people are basically teaching, I'm using air quotes on that, somebody to drive without those basic fundamentals. So that's important. So police, the infrastructure changes that we have already started implementing that are forthcoming. My desire to see the Department of Public Works use our biking infrastructure also to curb reckless driving, not just with painted bike lanes, but with protected bike lanes where we can do them, elevated bike lanes where we can do them, because it becomes another hindrance to folks who want to drive recklessly in the city. So many things. Another thing to keep young people particularly engaged is working to make sure they know what opportunities are available to them, right? In Milwaukee, we often hear that there's nothing to do in the summer. Well, there's plenty of things to do in the summer. And I think it was 2 weeks ago, I corralled a number of partners, youth-serving organizations from all across Milwaukee, north side, south side, east, west. And we came together in a press event. We said, hey, for young people that want something to do in Milwaukee, for parents who are interested in having their young people engaged, here are all the places. And here are all the things you can do. I mean, you could play midnight basketball. You could be in a makerspace. You can get a job, a summer youth job with the Earn and Learn program. I mean, there's opportunities for you to eat, to swim. I mean, so many things to do in Milwaukee. All it takes is for you to look it up and have that sort of access. And then lastly, before we go into the next question here, I cannot stress this enough. It's not just on me as mayor. It can't be. It's not just on Jeff Norman as the chief of police or the entirety of the police department. It cannot be. It also has to be on the community. It also has to be on parents specifically. So if you are a teacher, a preacher, if you're a mentor, you're a friend, you're a parent, then I am asking you, and I think this community is asking you, to step up and to play your role and to be responsible for your young people. I mean, collectively, all of us have a role to play, and every young person is our kids. They're all our kids. But before they walk into that street, before they go into a school building, before they go behind the wheel of a car, they're your young people, and we need parents especially to step up in this regard.
Thank you again for being here. Also on the topic of violence, experts say for cities to effectively address a sharp rise in violent crime, you have to define the problem and then set specific goals that everybody can work toward. I'm wondering how you define the problem of violence in Milwaukee. Is it a challenge among youth? Is it 18 to 24-year-olds? How do you define the challenges that the city is facing?
Well, when you look at the thing when folks think about violent crime in Milwaukee, they turn on the news at 10 o'clock, or they turn on the news in the morning, and they catch up about what happened overnight. And the thing that makes people feel unsafe, two things, are the issue of reckless driving, which it just touched on, which we're working to address, and then also the fact that unfortunately in this community and cities like it across the country, there are these rash of shootings. All of us, at least for a time, and it should be different. It should be different. For a moment in time, there is national outrage when a mass shooting happens. But in cities, we see this on a daily basis. It's slow motion mass murder, on a constant basis. So that's something that all of us should be more attuned to, and all of us should be upset by. I think that there are a number of things that we can do, that we should do collectively as a society in order to address it. But we also have to understand that there are lanes of responsibility here, right? When you go back to the incident that happened downtown on the 13th of May, right? There are systems in place, right? And you think about the city's system, and the city system largely is, police. We have other, partners in public safety, certainly, but we have the police as well. That's the critical component of that. The city system acted, right? The officers sprung into action. They arrested, I believe, some 10 people. They took some 10 people off the street. They arrested them, and they took those guns off the street, rather, too. But think about the system before that. Think about the system before that. And the system before that is not controlled by us at the city. We just simply have to react to it. The system before that is controlled by other levels of government, be it state government or federal government, that continues to allow individuals, whether they are ill-tempered, whether they are violent, to too easily access guns. And that leads into why people feel unsafe, because they see the level of gun crime in cities like Milwaukee. Shootings that are fatal and non-fatal, right? We should get a handle on that. And we're doing that. We're working to do that on the city's end with our part of the system. But we need our partners in the other systems, the other units of government, to also do their part and do some things that are just simply common sense, right? I mean, just think about the last month in America, right? An elementary school, another elementary school, where you've got children, the most innocent among us in society, who are slaughtered, right? You at a grocery store, right? People just go on shopping, and they get slaughtered. A church, people get slaughtered. Just the other day in Oklahoma, at a hospital, people get slaughtered. And then on streets of cities like this across the country, people are getting slaughtered, right? And nobody in the other systems seem to want to do anything about that. We need them to act. We need them to act, because these are not just Milwaukeeans, right? These are Wisconsinites. These are Americans that are losing their lives to deadly gun violence, and we could implement some common sense things to stop it, such as if a person is known to be a violent offender, well, then guess what? That person probably shouldn't have access to a gun, right? That's simple. I don't think that's a crazy, out there, or partisan thing to say. If a person is a violent offender, they should not have access to a gun. If they're a domestic abuser, well, then guess what? They probably shouldn't have access to a gun. If somebody's got a bad history, there should be background checks. I heard just this week on Upfront, one of the excuses is that, well, if we want to sell our gun to our brother or our cousin or whatever, as a law-abiding citizen, well, having these additional background checks becomes a hindrance. So you're telling me that a simple inconvenience to you means that we should allow the bad guys out there who have these guns to sell them or give them away to their brothers or their cousins who are going out here doing God knows what? And we see it on the streets of our city, or we see it in hospitals and in grocery stores and in elementary schools? That's wrong. And we can do something about it. We can, but collectively as a society, we just haven't. And we have to continue to raise our voice to our elected officials in those areas that control that part of the system so that these things do not happen. And that would have a direct effect on the things that we see on the streets of cities like Milwaukee.
Just to follow up on that, what specific steps have you taken to try to address this with the state government, with the federal government? What have you done on this issue?
I consistently have called this out. I've consistently called this out. I mean, I'm sure you could take a look at the city's legislative package, and we constantly are calling for more control over the opportunity for people, especially those folks who should not have them, from getting access to firearms, because we don't want to see people get slaughtered on our streets. So I've certainly been supportive of that. I'm using my position and my platform as mayor right now to call it out yet again, right? If folks, in this community think that it's important to have holistic public safety, I agree, and have supported, initiatives around violence prevention, around, making sure we have an adequate number of police officers on our department, working to make sure, as I said, that we joined in with a number of youth-serving organizations to try to steer young people away from what could be some troubling activities that they may partake in our community. So there are a number of things that I have done, actions that I've taken, and will continue to take in order to address the issue. But let me not let it be lost on us that at the local level, at least in Wisconsin, I know the laws are different in other states, but at least here in this one, we don't control the gun law. So we all collectively, if you're sick and tired of seeing, people being shot and killed in Milwaukee because of disputes, if you're sick and tired of seeing people being shot and killed in other parts of the state because there are suicides that are being committed or whatnot, then we all have to do our part to collectively put the pressure where it needs to go to make sure that these laws are in place so that those things don't happen on our streets.
Mayor Johnson, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with a room full of journalists. We appreciate it. As we talk about violence, I want to turn to what we're seeing with response times in the city. And with violent crimes at such high levels and police staffing down, we're seeing that response times are up across the board too. And data showing that the most serious calls saw about 36% increase in time it takes to get a squad car to the scene from 2020 to 2021. I just want to know your thoughts on what we're seeing with response times in the community and the strategy that you're taking with the police department to solve that issue.
Yeah, that's a great question. Look, in the city, we want to make sure that there is the appropriate number of police officers to be able to go and address the issues, the critical public safety issues that our citizens have. When somebody calls for 911 services, they're at sometimes the lowest or most dangerous point in their life, and they should have somebody who's able to respond appropriately in order to help them with that issue. That's what I want to see. I think that's what our residents expect. There is, however, a finite number of dollars and a finite number of staff, and a finite number or finite ability for us to be able to raise money to be able to pay for the police officers in question. Look, I think the journalists in this room know full well that I was a supporter of making sure that the city of Milwaukee accepted a federal COPS grant to make sure that we have more officers on the streets. And right now, those officers that we fought for in that COPS grant, they're on the streets of Milwaukee right now today, protecting and serving the citizens of our city. I want to see the requisite number of police. There is, though, there are two headwinds that we're facing. One is this national this national thing that we've been seeing, where unfortunately people are not at work, and people have been separating from work. That's also been happening in policing as well. Officers are hitting 25 years and then they're leaving, right? So that's something that we have to continually work at, and something that I am interested in working at as well. So you've got that issue, and then there's the issue of funding. I think folks in here know well enough that Milwaukee is I believe the only large city in America that does not have the ability to raise its own tax at the local level, right? So for instance, all you, if you paid for lunch in here today and you were in some other city, there probably would have been some tax on that would go to the local city government to help support local government initiatives, whether it be police or fire or public works or the like. We don't have that ability to do. We don't have the ability to do that here in the city of Milwaukee, unfortunately. And so that presents a challenge for us. And so that's why I've constantly talked about the need to improve the relationship between the city of Milwaukee and our partners in Madison. The only way that we're going to be able to solve the dire fiscal challenges, including the challenge that we have for funding and staffing the police department, is with a stronger partnership with Madison. And so I'm working on that every single day.
We've seen a lot of news about development in the city, likewise in other cities, but here we're seeing development. There's talk in this Iron District that could happen. Deer District is always talking about adding some more venues. For a city this size, is it able to help those venues thrive? Is the city capable of continuing to bring customers into those venues, and what can the city do to help ensure that these developers get what they need from them?
Well, if it's a question of selling tickets, I mean, that's not us. That's the responsibility of those folks who are building and operating the facility. So, look, I have consistently said I want to see more growth. I want to see more development. I want to see more opportunity in Milwaukee, and I'm not shying away from that. And if I have my way, look, this is going to be a city of upwards to and over 1 million people. So there should be more than enough people to sell tickets to in Milwaukee. But I want to see more growth. I want to see more development, more jobs, more opportunity in Milwaukee.
Just returning, I guess, to violence briefly. I had mentioned before the experts who say that you need to have a definition for the problem and also have specific goals to work toward. What are your specific goals? Is it, to reduce the number of children who are shot? As some cities have set goals of a 10% decrease in non-fatal shooting victims. Are there specific goals that you in the police department are working toward?
I think, we've got a serious challenge right now in Milwaukee, and not just in Milwaukee, but in cities across the country, with getting our hands around the record levels of violence that we're seeing. In this city, year over year for the past, several years since COVID set in, we've seen, unfortunately, record-breaking numbers in terms of non-fatal shootings as well as homicides that have happened in the city. That's happened in 2020. It happened in 2021, and we're on track, unfortunately, to break even those historical numbers from 2021 here in 2022. So, my goal is to reduce the number of people who are shot and killed in Milwaukee. I mean, I think that's a common goal that any mayor of any city who sees people, again, being slaughtered on their streets wants to see. But it's a difficult thing to get around. You know why? Again, because we're putting forward our best effort with the resources and the tools that we have, but some of these things are outside of the realm of the city. So that's why it's important for us to continue the dialogue and continue to work with our partners at state government to get some better controls on people who have access to guns too easily and would use them for deadly means on the street. This is all interrelated, and we need the partnerships around in order to solve these issues. And so I am heartened. I think that when I became mayor, there has been some receptiveness to members of the legislature that I've engaged in. They've engaged the same thing with me. I try to have conversations with them and build new relationships with them. I will continue to do that for as long as I'm in this office. There is no way forward, at least not in the short term, for Milwaukee to succeed, for Milwaukee to address the concerns that we have around criminal activity, especially the shootings that we see, both fatal and non-fatal, unless we have a better relationship with Madison. So I want to see a reduction in the people who are shot. I attend and have for a number of years the vigil for homicide victims that happens in December here in Milwaukee, and one candle is too much. But as I've been gone there the past several years, I've seen more and more and more candles. And I want to solve this problem. I think that people in the community want to solve this problem too. But we need everybody in the game, and that does not exclude the people in Madison. We need them to be our partners in this as well. And I will say again, and I've said this a number of times as well, that for folks out there in the neighborhoods, right, you've got tremendous power to affect positive change in your neighborhoods. You do. But we need you to be engaged. We need you to call. We need you to report. You can do those things. And I know that folks are afraid of potential retaliation. There are a number of ways to report things that are going on wrong in your neighborhoods and to do it anonymously. The Milwaukee Police Department has an anonymous tip line, and I encourage people to use it. The Office of Violence Prevention, you can call, you can reach out there, and you can report things anonymously as well. You also have the opportunity to call Crime Stoppers directly and report things anonymously. And if none of those things work, if you're not comfortable talking to police or OBP or to Crime Stoppers, then you should reach out to your local elected official and have them on your behalf anonymously to report the things that are happening in your neighborhood, so we can take back control from the folks who are doing bad things in neighborhoods across the city.
So if you can identify one thing, what do you think is the biggest reason behind the shootings, the homicides that we're seeing in the city? Just one reason behind it.
If I were to identify one thing outside of the extreme ease of access for people to get guns, even those folks who are violent or ill-tempered or the like, something outside of that, I would say it's stability. In this community, we lack stability in our neighborhoods, unfortunately. That's something that we have to change. That's why every time I get the opportunity to go in front of business executives, I tell them the importance of making sure you pay folks a family supporting wage. And I'm not just saying that because it's a cliche thing to say. I believe it. I believe it, and I mean it, because this is what I believe. If employers pay their employees a living wage, right, then they take that money home. It puts them in a better position to purchase their own home. And if they don't want to purchase their home, they can become a long-term renter. It takes away financial stress. And if they don't have that financial stress, then guess what? They're presenting stability in the lives of their kids. And they're presenting stability in the lives of their kids. Well, then the reaction of their young people is different when they go into the streets, is different when they go into schools. And those people are not moving around. They're not so transient. And then if they're not so transient, then our neighborhoods are not so porous. And if our neighborhoods are not so porous, then those neighborhoods start to become cohesive. They start to gel. And when neighborhoods start to gel and people get to know each other, and it's not like, hey, somebody that you don't talk to, that person actually becomes a true neighbor. And when neighborhoods become cohesive and they start to gel, people start caring about each other. You start to build a sense of community, and that's how we get to true public safety. So my answer would be stability, that we lost in Milwaukee when, starting decades ago, we started losing heavy manufacturing jobs that once upon a time helped to propel this city to be the city in the United States with the highest quality of life for African Americans. And you see what's happened as a result, right? We no longer have that, and especially for Black people in Milwaukee, we are at the top of the worst of lists. And that's a direct correlation with the fact that we lost the stability that those jobs were able to provide.
You signed framework this week to welcome the RNC if they were to choose Milwaukee for its convention in 2 years. Who did you have to lean on behind the scenes to make that happen? Because it didn't look like that was going to happen a week ago. And why, if you are still confident that they'll decide on Milwaukee later this month?
Well, things are behind the scenes for a reason, so I'll leave those behind the scenes. Look, I've been in front of the scenes for some time on this, and I believe that the Republicans ultimately will choose Milwaukee. But I think this is important for Milwaukee for a number of reasons. The same way that I thought the Democratic National Convention was important to Milwaukee, the same thing applies here. First and foremost, to those folks who perhaps are critics. I don't believe that simply because the Republican National Convention, I'm going to say, will come to Milwaukee, because you got to speak things into existence, right? I don't think that because they will come here means that any elected official or any member of our public who does not want to be is signing up for the platform of the Republican Party. I certainly am not. Now, when we talk about it being a bipartisan approach, look, I'm in a nonpartisan office. I serve every single member of this community. It doesn't matter your political stripe. It doesn't matter if you're black, you're white, you're gay, you're straight, you're able-bodied, you're not. It doesn't matter if you're Republican, Independent, Democrat. I serve everybody as mayor. And to me, it does not mean that you're signing up for the Republicans' platform. That's just not the case. But to me, my understanding is this, is that by hosting the Republican National Convention, what it means is that this city, this region, and this state, our collective community, is going to see an infusion of resources, $200 million of economic impact. That's powerful. It's powerful to the businesses that are established in Milwaukee. It's powerful to the businesses that are working to scale up in Milwaukee. It's powerful, most importantly, to the workers in those businesses. Because the restaurants and the bars and the hotels will be booming in this city. And those are the folks who specifically over the course of the past 2 years have been battered and hammered by COVID. So we're providing a significant boost to them. And I think this is, the other thing that's critically important about the RNC is that this presents the opportunity for us to have a concrete foundation on which to build to attract other large-scale convention, sports, and entertainment events to the city of Milwaukee. I just said it in my comment earlier before. I want to see more growth. I want to see more development. I want to see more population growth in the city of Milwaukee. This is a means to an end. This is not a political decision. It's a business one. It's a business one. And that's what I need folks to understand. This is about not right now. It's not like this. It's like this. And that's the way that I see it. I think that that's the way that folks in the community generally see it. And that's what I want. That's what I want to happen. I mean, I know that not to point folks out in the crowd here, but Marty Brooks over at the Wisconsin Center District is here, and they're expanding the Wisconsin Center District. It's doubling in size. Look, I want the balance of that building to be filled, and this presents an opportunity to put Milwaukee in the national spotlight, the global spotlight, even. Right? It puts the opportunity. It gives Milwaukee the chance to be in the global spotlight to attract other large-scale events. And I want that convention center to be filled, not just with this, but many, many events in the future. I don't want Milwaukee to be this afterthought that it usually is. We're usually not even in the conversation. Folks don't even talk about Milwaukee. They talk about going to New York and LA and Chicago and some other cities now. Now Milwaukee's in the mix. I want Milwaukee to remain in the mix, and this helps us to do that.
Mayor, staying on the RNC, I guess, do you have any concerns about hosting a party where some have not accepted the results of the 2020 presidential election and have specifically cast doubts on the validity of Milwaukeeans' votes?
I disagree with those sentiments wholeheartedly. For those folks who were saying that, we had a free, transparent, and fair election. I'll say that to anybody, including any Republican. That does not mean, though, that we cannot host the convention here and the city gets to benefit from the fact that the convention is here. Look, again, just because the convention is here does not mean you're signing up for the platform of the Republican Party. I am not. That doesn't mean you lose your value. In fact, I think, quite frankly, for those folks that disagree with the stance of Republicans, this presents the very best opportunity that you have to say that. You now have a national audience, captive audience, that's looking at Milwaukee, and you can get on that stage and you can say what you feel about the Republicans who will be in town here in Milwaukee during the convention. It presents the best opportunity to do that.
Can you give us a little bit of what happened behind the scenes we won't tell, literally from late last week to when that signature happened. Kind of pull the curtain back. What happened? How did it happen?
Are there any curtains in here? Look, as you know, again, I have been a supporter of bringing this convention to Milwaukee for all the reasons that I stated. I continue to put forward that leadership to bring the convention to Milwaukee for all the reasons that I stated. I continue to have those conversations. We continue to do the work. I mean, that's what it was. There's no secret sauce here. Like we just continue to work hard and tell the story about why it was important and why I thought that it was important for the council to approve the agreement, and ultimately that's what happened. There's no secret here. That's probably pretty boring, so hopefully that helped out a little bit.
You have a brother who was arrested earlier this year, faces a felony charge. Have you spoken with him, and how has that affected you personally?
No, I have not spoken with my brother. And, I was just telling somebody earlier today that when I was at Phyllis Wheatley for the remodel that's happening there. Again, I lived across the street in a duplex that had since been torn down. I believe there's a vacant lot there now. I consistently spoke about during the campaign that, look, I've got one brother who runs a prison, runs a Wisconsin prison as a warden, and I've got another brother who's been his inmate. I haven't shied away from that. It's part of my story. Look, I grew up in 53206, right? I mean, half of the black men, half the people who look like me, who live in that zip code, come from that zip code, would have spent some time behind bars. I got a number of brothers, but if it's just, me and him that you're looking at, then that's half, right? So it's not, terribly surprising. It is not easy for young black men who grow up in environments like that to be able to escape those environments. I think it's purely by the grace of God and some good luck that I am not the person you see on that TV screen, because I've made some mistakes in my life too. I certainly have. But to the question of have I spoken to my brother? No, I haven't spoken to him. And how has it affected me? Look, I have been hoping for years and years and years that he would turn his life around. And there, throughout our time growing up, have been these incredible glimmers of hope where it seemed like he was on the right track, where he was on the right path. But unfortunately, again, it's so easy to get tripped back up. And unfortunately, and it is unfortunate, and I'm very sorry, for the people that he did hurt, or to the people in the family that he did hurt. Sometimes, for folks, it's easy to get sucked back, into that sort of lifestyle. So no, I haven't spoken to him, but it's part of my life story, and it's not just my life story. That's a life story for so many Milwaukeeans. I mean, think about it. I often reflect on the fact that when I was a younger person, I remember vividly going east on Locust, east of King Drive for the first time. For those of you that know the terrain, like there's that big hill as you're heading towards the east side. And I remember going over that hill for the first time. And it was like a part of my brain had been unlocked. It was a whole new world that I had never seen. I didn't know anything about the east side. I hadn't seen it. UWM, Newberry, Oakland Avenue, I knew nothing about it. Because for too many people, and for too many black people, too many black men, too many people of color generally, you get locked into neighborhoods like that, and that's the only thing that you experience. Your world becomes 4 points. The 4 points on a city block, the 4 points that my dad told me to get off of when I was a kid. My dad told me to get off the block. And at first I thought he was being very literal, but he was talking about expanding your horizons and going beyond just that. Because for too many people, and myself included, my brother certainly as well, your whole world is those 4 points on the block. It's school, it's the corner store, it's a relative's house, and it's home. And that's the only thing that you see. So that's if we work to reach out and make sure that people who live in neighborhoods like that have more exposure and more opportunity, then you can change the world for them. That's what happened to me, who had those same experiences that my brother did growing up. And you guys are sitting here talking to me. I'm the mayor, and he's in jail, right? So more people need opportunities like that, especially in neighborhoods like 53206. Yeah, well, I think it's important as well to understand that I came into office. I came into office at the end of December in 2021, and when I was elected in April, the legislature had left session. So they're not even in session. So they're out running for re-election themselves right now. But I have continuously worked to have meetings with members of the legislature, on these topics. So we're not going to have movement, not legislative movement, on the sales tax right now. Obviously, when the legislature is not in session, that's just not going to happen. When I ran for this office, and what I just explained to folks, before, is the fact that I am a political realist. And the political reality is that we're not going to be able to move the ball forward in the city of Milwaukee without cooperation, without partnership from Madison. But you also have to be a realist and understand that with members of the legislature out of session and running for office right now, that we're not going to have that movement legislatively right now. But again, I think that there is hope and that there is promise in the conversations that I've had with legislators. I think they are beginning to better understand the dire financial situation that not just Milwaukee, the city of Milwaukee, but Milwaukee County, and not even just the largest city and the largest county in the state, but other communities around Wisconsin are facing. I've talked at length about traveling up to Rhinelander to the Joint Finance Committee. I believe during the last budget, and telling members of the Joint Finance Committee about the challenges that we have at the city. The county executive was there and did the same thing about the county's finances. But instead of turning around and driving back to Milwaukee right away, I sat and I listened to other communities across the state. You're a mayor of a small town, or you're a superintendent of a tiny school district, and everybody is singing the same tune. Is that Madison, the way that you fund local governments is just broken. It does not work. We are suffering. We can't pay our bills, basically. And then later on, if you get an op-ed from the mayors of Madison and the mayor of Brookfield, who again, I believe probably are opposed politically, but they came together on this issue. And I say, you could set Madison aside because it's the second largest city in the state, right? And they've got issues similar to Milwaukee, just not on the same scale, right? You set them aside, but Brookfield, wealthy Brookfield, you know what I mean? Like one of the wealthiest communities in the state, and they're having problems paying their bills. They see what's going on. If it doesn't work for Brookfield, it just simply does not work. It just simply doesn't work. And that's the message that we've got to get across to legislators in Madison, not just for Milwaukee's sake, but for the sake of communities across the entire state of Wisconsin. And that's what I want to do. Those are the conversations that I am having and will continue to have with legislators, especially as they lead back up to the next legislative session after their elections this fall.
Okay, I want to know what the transition has been like for you. You have veterans in your office who were with the mayor for some time, Mayor Barrett, and then you have some newer people in the office, what has this transition been like for you from common council president to the mayor? What challenges are you overcoming?
You know, as a when you first get elected, or at least I guess I should speak for my own self. When I first was elected, I saw things in the lens of my own aldermanic district, the second aldermanic district on the northwest side of the city that I love, and I'm very eternally grateful to the people of the second district for electing me there in 2016. As I proceeded in office, I started to use the experience that I had growing up in the city, in neighborhoods across Milwaukee and going to schools in neighborhoods across Milwaukee and having a more citywide point of view. That was honed as city council president, and in the transition to the mayor's office, it was like another part of your mind gets unlocked that you just don't even see because you're just not dealing with it at that level. So it's been good to transition some of my staff that I had with me on the council side into the mayor's office because we have worked well together and are still able to get things done. But it's also important to make sure that I had some historical knowledge, some institutional knowledge in the mayor's office that could help me to traverse some of the challenges that I now face as mayor that they have dealt with in the past. So it's been, I would say that the transition has been good because of my experience on the council, because of the people that I brought in from the council side that I had a great working relationship with, and then utilizing the institutional knowledge of the folks who had been there in the mayor's office who I had gotten to know over years as well.
You once said a few years ago that ultimately it'd be great to be president. Do you still want to be president?
I was president of the Common Council, so
of the United States.
Look, I did say that, but I think it deserves a little context. So, so when I was a 14-year-old kid, it was my freshman year at Bayview High School. I had just gotten accepted into this pre-college program called Sponsor a Scholar that was run by the YMCA. And the goal of that program was to present an opportunity for kids, for young people who grew up in neighborhoods like 53206 who were low-income students in Milwaukee public schools to go off to college and be the first person in their family to graduate. Nobody in my family nobody even ever mentioned college to me. I didn't know what it was. It was a foreign concept. And so I got involved with that program. That program also presented an opportunity for those same young people to get involved in service and giving back. And at the age of 14, I fell in love with serving, with helping out the people in this city. And later on that same year, 9/11 happened. So just months apart, I fell in love with service through the Y, and then 9/11 happens. President Bush at the time was at ground zero, and it was a tragic day, a tragic moment in time for our country. And what I saw was a person who was a president of the United States who was working to bring people together. And 14-year-old me, that's important. 14-year-old me said, aha, the light bulb went off. I could go into government and have a career where I serve people every day, like I fell in love with doing at the YMCA. And I had seen the president of the United States at the time and said, "That's it. I'm going to be president." So that was 14-year-old me. Right now, I'm going to give you a very political answer and say that I'm very focused on doing my job as mayor of the city of Milwaukee, and that's where I will leave it.
All right. Well, thank you, Eric, Allison, and Aaron, for great questions. Now we can take questions from the audience. Does anybody have? We'll start with the man in the middle. I just wanted to know what changed you, what changed your path in contrast to your brothers. And when you were talking about it, you said that you had changed, but what exactly changed?
Yeah. there were a couple of moments that I can identify in life. So he's my older brother. He's 2 years older, and we had older cousins who were 2 or 3 years older than me as well. And as a kid, and I'm the youngest one, so like I wanted to hang out with them, but they didn't. They didn't let me. I think probably because they thought that I would tell, or maybe they were looking out for me. I don't know. Sometimes I would catch up with them and they couldn't ditch me, and that's where sometimes I got in trouble. So, for instance, at the corner store at 33rd and Galena, we were there. It was late night, and I was going and I was stealing. Stealing gummy worms, right? I was going in and out. I was a terrible thief. I was going in and out of the store. I was stealing gummy worms, eating them. The clerk probably saw me on the camera. I'm just back and forth. And when I went in for the 8th or 9th time, the clerk sat me down and told me to empty my pockets. And I was as afraid as I could be. I think I was 8 years old. And the clerk said, "Hey, you can get into a lot of trouble for this. He just sat me down and talked to me, gave me a chance, He said, I can call the police and bad things can happen. That's all it took. It's somebody gave me a chance. Somebody gave me an opportunity, and then some of it was just personal ambition. Earlier this year there was an incident where 6 people were found murdered in a house on 21st and Right or so. I lived right across the street from that house growing up. And I remember being in 4th grade, sitting on the porch and looking around and experiencing what it was like to live in that house where, the bathroom water from the upstairs was running into our kitchen and the downstairs. The plumbing in our house did not work, and so many other things. And thinking to myself, I want more. I want more for myself and for my family and for my community. So I pulled my pants up and said I was going to behave differently and speak differently and try to do better. So some of it is personal ambition, and some of it is just because folks gave me a shot. They gave me a chance, including that YMCA program that I talked about, the Sponsor Scholar program. And to this day, more than 20 years later, I still wear this YMCA wristband every single day. They have the 4 core values of the Y: caring, honesty, respect, and responsibility. It's because somebody gave me a chance. Somebody gave me a shot. And that's why.
Back to your 14-year-old imagination of being president. So let's pretend that the city of Milwaukee gets the RNC, and the narrative out there is 53206 and evicted. That's the narrative. So what are your thoughts in terms of how you use, as the mayor, your leadership role to pivot Milwaukee, at least in terms of the narrative, from 53206 to something better? Intentionality on crime, on education, on housing, etc.
Yeah, I think all of those things are important. And 53206 and 53204 on the south side, I think, are case studies where the sort of forward-thinking things that we're looking to implement can change the trajectory there in places like that. Look, my belief is that if we work to address issues at their root cause, right, and those things that you mentioned, housing and healthcare and education and employment, then we can get to that sort of stability. Addressing issues at their root, we can create this environment in Milwaukee that's safer. We can create an environment that is more productive for business growth, which then leads to family supporting opportunities for our residents, which then leads to stability, not just for them and their families, but for our neighborhoods overall. Those are the things that I am working towards. Those are the things that root me in my job as mayor. Coming from neighborhoods just like that, 53206 and 53204 on the south side, and working to make sure that the people in those neighborhoods have those sort of opportunities. It sort of goes back to the old saying of, you're only as strong as your weakest link. Well, if the tide rises there, then guess what? The tide rises for everybody. It's not good just for the folks who live in those neighborhoods. That's then good for the city as a whole. And if the city of Milwaukee does well, then guess what? The entire state of Wisconsin does well. That's the way that I see it.
Yes, sir.
Some years ago, I was teaching at you go to Whitewater, it created, of course, some homicide, sociology of homicide. They had the district attorney, our district attorney come down and speak. But I'd like you to respond, if you would, to a comment that he made. The homicide rate in Milwaukee was half what it is this blip that we're in at the moment. He said that if we don't control homicide in Milwaukee, homicide will kill Milwaukee. How
Look, people are concerned about public safety, and especially that. That's what I talked about earlier. The shootings, certainly the non-fatal ones, but especially the fatal ones. You know, I think not just in Milwaukee generally, but in cities across the country, like people will make decisions based on the levels of crime that we see. That's why it's important for us to grapple that and to do it in a holistic way. It's 2022. We know better now. We know that we can't just do it with police. They are an integral, important part of our public safety infrastructure. But it's not just them. It's the stability in the family that we're talking about. It's making sure that, you know, again, folks who shouldn't have access to guns, which most of our homicides come from, don't have that access. It's working to make sure that we have violence prevention methods. It's working to make sure that, you know, young people, especially wayward young people, have, you know, an opportunity to be engaged and not have idle time to, you know, commit, you know, violent acts in Milwaukee. And if we don't do those things, then people will make decisions. Like, people vote with their feet, you know. So it's important to make sure that we do get this right. You know, it's going to be hard for us to attract the sort of growth and the sort of development that I want to see. And I think generally, you know, in this community, people in Milwaukee want to see if we don't get these things under control. And I think the same thing is true. That's not Milwaukee specific. I think that's generally true of cities across the country.
All right, yeah. I'd like to know, does the city of Milwaukee presently charter its schools? And if they do, what would you like to see going on in those schools?
The city of Milwaukee does presently charter schools. I don't know the exact number off top, but the city of Milwaukee does, you know, currently charter schools. What I expect to see out of, you know, those schools that are chartered is an opportunity for our young people, those who are attending, who make the choice to go to those city charter schools, to have the opportunity to get a good quality education. Look, that's outside of, you know, the issues around public safety. You know, folks are concerned about education as well, and people, particularly families, make critical decisions. Businesses make critical decisions based on, you know, the foundation of education that you have in a community. You know, people will, you know, start businesses, move businesses, have kids, not have kids, move to a city or not, based on school systems. We know this, right? And so for the schools that are under the city's, the common council's purview, I want those schools to be in a position where they're creating, contributing, productive members to society through education with the schools that we charter at the city.
Joy. Thank you for coming. You mentioned stability being important, and one of the key elements of stability is housing, right? And there are a number of groups in Milwaukee that are trying to help people own homes and, you know, have that standing housing coalition. But there's also been private equity buyers coming in buying with that stock, not enough stock of affordable homes, but of course the economics of decent housing prices makes it even harder. But the state legislature also has limited the county council tried to pass something to force those outside buyers to maintain homes for renters and things like that. And I think that the legislature should shut down that. Are you talking to the state legislature at all about that issue, about housing? What is that a priority item to try to support those organizations trying to get housing documents?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I mean, that's something that we need further conversation with the legislature on as well. But look, I went to 6 different elementary schools in NPS. We moved around a ton, so I understand the value and the importance of stability in housing. You know, more than most. I would say this, that at the city, you know, we are taking steps to try to make sure that individuals have access to affordable housing. In fact, when we talk about, you know, the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, the largest expenditure that we've ever made on affordable housing happened just last year in a piece of legislation that I was the lead sponsored on to shepherd through, where we allocated some $40+ million to take the city's inventory, because obviously the city came into ownership of a number of properties via tax foreclosure after the financial collapse in 2008. So we've been working to get that backlog of properties into the hands of property owners and not in the hands of government, because it does us no good to have them. So we're taking what the city has in its portfolio. We're investing tens of millions of dollars to get those houses remediated, to sell them at affordable rates to folks who are trying to be homeowners and stabilizers, most importantly, in our neighborhoods, right? So that's something that's important. I think there's room for further conversation with the legislature about making sure that when some of these outside forces come in trying to purchase property, that there are protections in place so that we can continue to increase the affordability of homes in Milwaukee. That's an excellent point. That's an excellent point, and something that we are actively working on with what I did, and actually what the former mayor did as well in one of his last budgets. There was a retiring, I believe, a tax incremental financing district, and there were several $1 million left over. And in an effort that I supported, said, hey, let's take some of those dollars to support individuals in Milwaukee who are working to buy their first home, right? So that's something that we're actively working on.
How you doing, Mayor? My question is, a lot of the conversation is about black males, right? And it's June, summertime, so we're about to start the summer. Why do you think black males need mentors, and what are you going to do to change the trajectory of young black boys in your community?
I think that's a great question. I think that young black men need mentors because a positive male role model can help to change the trajectory in somebody's life. Look, if you're not getting that at home, if that's not happening at home, it should happen somewhere, and anybody can step up and be a mentor. This YMCA program that I talked about, not only was it a scholarship program, it was also a mentorship program. And I had mentors to help to guide me as well, and it benefited me. And I know that there are a number of other mentorship programs that have helped kids in neighborhoods like that to stay on the straight and narrow in life. So I think that's why it's critically important. I think that I've partnered already with Mentor Greater Milwaukee to increase the importance of mentors. We had an event in the Rotunda City Hall just a month or two ago where, using my own experience, my mentorship experience, we're allowing for City of Milwaukee employees to be able to take some time off to mentor kids in Milwaukee, to take an hour out of the day to go and mentor a young person, to show them that, hey, we care, especially if they're not receiving that sort of support at home. I just joined on with my mentor from the YMCA program from when I was, a freshman in high school, just the other day to record a video with Mentor Greater Milwaukee to tell the story, working to recruit additional mentors to be a part of that program for kids, but particularly for young kids of color in Milwaukee who need that additional support, especially if it's not happening at home. That's why I said earlier, if you're a teacher, if you're a preacher, if you're a mentor, if you're a friend, if you're a parent, then everybody needs to be involved. And mentors can play an incredible role in helping to shape the life of young people in our community. I firmly believe that. And I'm proof of it. Proof of it.
I'm sorry we didn't get to all the questions, I promise. So, thank you again to our sponsors, Spectrum News Pledge and BluesPolitics.com. I want to thank the Newsroom Pub. This place is awesome. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to our panel. And thank you so much, Mayor, for being here.